This month, Craig Bruska or Ruska, I don't know if it's be a silent or not. Um, that is coming in. He is the current chair of the NPSOT Native Seed Committee, and he will be presenting collecting native seeds to us today. He is remote from the Austin area, Travis County, I believe. I think he's on the outskirts, lucky dog. He will teach us everything we need to know about seeds, how to collect them, identifying ripe seeds, how to clean, store, and plant them later. Um, so without further ado, we have Craig.
Good
Thanks.
evening. Good evening, Dallas. I will share my screen here in just a second. And that should be all good. So this presentation was originally created for the Texas Master Naturalist Conference in College Station last fall. So I wear both hats, Texas Master Naturalist and the NPSOT one. And you can tell from my accent that I am not a native Texan. I'm a Chicago boy. So one of the things that's interesting about that, I grew up with, tall grass prairie, and now I live in New Braunfels in the Texas Blackland Prairie. And most of you that are along the I-35 corridor are also Blackland. So I'll be speaking of species common to us. And so for the agenda for today, I'll talk about plants of our ecoregion. So we are going to be primarily discussing Blackland Prairie. I'll talk about understanding seeds, seed collecting. I will talk about the ethics, protecting biodiversity, understanding the different needs of plants, methods of collecting plants that have ripe seeds in summer, and seed drying and storage. And then I'll talk about demonstrating seed collecting techniques and then circle back to the NPSOT database. So we are happily in the Blackland Prairie here. So it makes it nice and easy. So understanding seeds. Native plants produce a large amounts of seed. The best thing I can point out is Mother Nature math. A big oak tree, big mature bur oak, and that may put out 1,000 acorns. Of that 1,000, between insects, squirrels, and other nut eaters, maybe you'll have 100 seedlings that pop up, and then between deer predation, drought, you may end up with 10 seedlings or 10 young trees coming up, and all told, you end up with one healthy oak tree that lives to grow to full maturity. By Mother Nature's calculation, that one success is how it works. If you're a vegetable gardener, those kind of numbers horrify you. And Texas environment has hot summer temperatures, periods of drought, periods of intense rain and flash flooding. And here in the hill country edge, the Guadalupe River, we are experiencing that. I had 1.1 inches over the weekend. And from this morning when I checked the gauge till when I checked it in late afternoon, we had 5 inches in my yard. And I am flat Blackland Prairie, so my yard has water standing on it right now, which is a wonderful thing because my yard was cracking, as some of you have probably known. Um, because of that, seed conditions, they evolved to delay sprouting until conditions are right to grow. Sometimes germination can be delayed for years, lying fallow in soil seed bank. In my previous life back in Illinois, I worked for a county forest preserve district, And in my 8 years, I helped restore 1,000 acres of wetland over a series of projects. And restoring wetlands involves taking out field tiles. So think of a septic field running in reverse. Instead of putting water into the field, it's taking water out of the field and sending it to a ditch, onto a river, or down slope. And the great thing about restoring a wetland is all you have to do is add water, and all those seeds that have been sitting in the seed bank, and in some cases for well over 100 years, suddenly pop up and say, "We're wet. Let's produce marsh flowers." The two ways that seeds inhibit germination are physical, involving the external or exterior of the seed, and physiological, which involves behavior internal or the interior of the seed. Physical seeds cases stop water from entering. So you have to find a way of opening up the shell, and I'll talk some more about that as we're going. The hard shells and techniques. Once you break that shell, must be exposed to scarification, temperature, alternate periods of freezing and thawing. But once you do that, the seed will deform, taking in the water and doing it. Physiological protected seeds are permeable to water entering, but dormancy can only be broken by stratification. Some seeds use dual dormancy with both inhibitors present. In these cases, the physical barrier must be breached first, then the physiological barrier eliminated. So methods used to disperse their seeds. Wind is a very common one, especially in prairies. Grasses generally blow. They're not doing much beyond that. Water, the best example of a water distributed seed is the bald cypress, present from East Texas all the way to the far side of the hill country. Animals, as I was talking about oaks earlier, squirrels are forest builders, not by intention, but by forgetfulness. Explosive mechanisms, dehenescence, and I think I pronounced that correctly, though I've been known to butcher it. And that is where it expands. The two most common of those that you're probably familiar with is bluebonnets. The pod will actually corkscrew and then shatter, and then any of the milkweeds that the case will open up and expel all the seeds. Gravity, it just will fall. And then structural traits, especially in tall grass areas, the flower heads and that are elevated above the leaf area, the leafy part of it. And that will be, when it blows in the wind, it will then expel the seeds from it. And I'll talk some more about that. Talking specifically about ethics, collecting seeds with permission and where it is legally permitted. Now, I collect 80 to 90% of the seeds that I collect at my yard, but I also volunteer at places like the headwaters at the Comal, where I will help them collect seeds, and we will primarily put those seeds in other locations within that preserve area, but the surplus, because it generally produces enough seed that I can take it for either planting in my yard or putting into seed libraries. Know the Texas plants of greatest conservation concern and only collect as allowed. And that allowed is very limited. Do not collect on federal or state parks or nature areas. That will get you in trouble. And I have a story that when I was working with the seed libraries and seed collection in San Antonio and Bexar County, a happy volunteer was very proud of herself. She had collected this plant which was not only on the Texas plants of greatest conservation concern, but also collected from Palmetto State Park. So she managed to do two bad things simultaneously. Took me a little effort. I went back and handed that envelope to our Texas master naturalist who volunteered there at Palmetto to hand it back to the rangers there so they could scatter it back at Palmetto State Park. Now, the one exception to state land is the state roadway collection rule. And it doesn't explicitly say seed collection, but that's because it says you can collect flowers. And seeds and seed heads are the culmination of the flower's life cycle. So you can collect seeds from a Texas roadway. Usually it's a big challenge to collect the seeds before the mowers come, though the people I know that work for TxDOT as biologists try to work to defer mowing until the seeds are going. So you can't pull the whole plant. That's a big no-no, but you can collect the seeds there and limit collection to 10% of the available seeds. The reasons for doing that are twofold. One is you want to make sure that the seeds are there on the roadway so it can reseed. The seeds are there for wildlife, whether it's a seed-eating bird or other wildlife that's going to live on those seeds. Annuals need to reseed the area. So things like bluebonnets, you definitely want to leave them there as much as possible. We talked about feeding wildlife. Perennials provide wildlife food and seeds for new plants. So they may get a new cluster of perennials there. One of the well-known ones for that is Mexican hat. Will create big clusters. And collecting samples from different plants. So as you're following the 10% rule, if you have a handful of a plant that's there, so you may take your 10%, maybe spread across 4, 5 to 10 individual mother plants and collect it. And the reason that you want to collect from different parents is that you'll mix those seeds for diversity. Now, if you have a full acre of seeds, a big field of it, then the genetics is guaranteed to be protected as you mix those seeds. Getting the diversity on small scale, you're still trying to get those individual plants that are there and get state or federal permission for collection. I know people, Michael Eason, I know from the San Antonio Botanic Garden, and his work there is critical, but he knows the state and federal officials and has the collection permit for the botanical gardens research and propagation. It is doable, or if you know somebody in a university that is doing scientific collection, you can work with them as well. So when collecting threatened from public land defined by as state and local government land for scientific purposes, there is the link there. And if I'll pause here for a bit. So if somebody wants to get a picture of the two links there, you can do it. It is very important to not do that, because if we let everybody run willy-nilly in a federal land or state land, we would very definitely put plants in jeopardy. So hopefully everybody's got a picture of the links if they want them. So collecting these with federal permits, collecting threatened and endangered species with federal permits. It is one of the funny areas that has caused some consternation is big red sage, which was a hill country thing. And the story was they thought it was extinct in the state. somebody was doing some of that and caught at the side of a inaccessible sort of area. They found it and they brought it back to Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center there in Austin and started propagating it to protect it and sold it. And then they got into, so I have it in my yard because I got it from Lady Bird's plant sale, but now it is considered transporting and selling threatened plants is very hard or endangered. So you run into some very careful areas. So be mindful at your plant sale. If it is on the threatened federal or state list, you probably want to make sure you're not selling it through your sales permit, even though it's there. It's very, very fun area. So if you want to share it with a friend because it's from your yard and you're putting it in their yard, that's okay. Commercial sale gets a little more tenuous. Understanding the different needs of plants. Perennials produce the next generation by seed or through rhizome, the root system. Biennials produce seeds in the second year, seeds needed to survive. And the best example of that is standing cypress. Annuals need to reseed. And I love using bluebonnets as sort of the definition for a lot of examples I'll talk about. Only collect when they're ripe. And I'll talk more about what that means. But, nothing makes me sadder than I get a seed donation for a seed library and I open it up and somebody gave me blue curl, gave me a beautiful thing. And it was as green as all get out. The flower looked great. It was there. So I hung on to it, hoping there might be, because they took a big chunk of the plant, I was hoping there might be enough energy to get the seed to get that last mile for doing. It did not. It ended up in my compost. It ended up in my mulch group. And I spread it out, but I know it never produced blue curl. I use organza bags. You might know them from sometimes referred to as jewelry bags, or if you've ever been given bird seed at a wedding, it's usually in an organza bag. And that is a great one for any explosive seed. So bluebonnets, dehiscents for dispersal. And the other thing to do is place seed pods in paper bags indoor to dry. Do not put them in plastic bags until you're thoroughly sure they are dry, because you do not want it to mold, because once you start getting the seeds to mold, they will damage the seed itself. For annual plants, the whole plant can be pulled out of the ground and put top down with the roots exposed. Near the very end, I will do this with bluebonnets in my yard. I once again, don't do that from state property, but I usually put organza bag on one or two there. And if you're not familiar with bluebonnet dispersion, what I found from anecdotal experience is the blast radius is about 5 feet around the plant. So when you're planting bluebonnets, if you have little seedlings, target about 5+ feet apart to give you the coverage so they overlap in their explosion. For perennials, cut seed heads and place in brown paper bags head down. Once again, by putting them head down, if the seed comes out of the top of the seed head, it will fall to the bottom of the bag. So let gravity and time do that for you. I talked about not putting in plaster bags because of mold. Seeds with pods collect before they explode. And you can see to the right there is a curled and exploded bluebonnet. And that's why I love organza bags, is because you can see some lower ones that do not look like they've exploded. And nothing is worse than you're watching it, you think you're going to collect it, and then the next morning you come out and it's empty. Put the plants out on a cleaning tray. I use roasting pans when processing seed heads like that, so that if it does pop and blows sideways, the sides of the roasting pan catch it. Put the plants, then you can take the seeds and put them on a plate and then measure them out. Open remaining pods, drop the seeds into the tray. Once all the plants are out of the paper bag, dump the seeds from the bag into your tray. Remove plants and empties from the tray. Great composting material, and if you're not composting, you can also treat it as an alternate form of mulch. Now separate the seeds from any remaining chaff, and if you're putting them in seed envelopes to give away, immaculate seeds are not necessary. I have volunteered at the Lady Bird Johnson's seed bank. There, we meticulously clean them to get rid of all the chaff, to be as pure a seed as possible. But if you're collecting it to put in a seed envelope for a giveaway, whether that's a tabling event or a seed library, a little chaff, a little side material is perfectly fine if you're putting them in envelopes. So the different types of seed pods, up in the corner, I talked about oaks. Mulberries is a berry that's wonderful with little seeds in it. Nuts in the beech. So these are some that are Texas familiar and some are not. Sycamores is a seed head. Drupes and hackberries. So each of these have their own nuances. Pods are there, and berry, persimmons. So each of the seeds have slightly different characteristics, and they also look a little different. So some of these, the semi-spheroid, I'll talk about there. Each of them have a slight variation in size, which makes it easy to, if you get more familiar with each of the seeds, you can just look at the shape of them. Somebody gave me a donation of milkweed, and it was not a milkweed that I was familiar with, and I did some research to find out which it was, because it was not any of the milkweeds that I was familiar with. It was much bigger and thicker than the milkweeds I'm used to. So in terms of size, mountain laurel being one of the bigger seeds. So we only put 5 of them in an envelope because that's what will fit comfortably in a coin envelope. Buckeye, both either Texas or Mexican. And then you have Alamo vine, rock rose, basket flower, and standing cypress. And you can see on the screen, you may not be able to get a sense, but those are in millimeters. They're very tiny seeds in the head. And what also makes it more challenging is the tan color the stalk gets to add when it is mature and dry. The top of each of the pods that it's growing in actually opens at the very top, like some other plants. And as it blows in the wind, the seeds will get flung out of it. So you may open up a pod and find no seeds in it because it's already expelled them, and some others may be there, but you have to be careful that are there. The other is minimize the amount of chaff you create. I had a enthusiastic volunteer. We were doing frostweed, which is a wonderful plant, and I had a chunk of it because I had harvested the plant and had head down in the bag. And the person decided to, instead of dealing with just the flower head, he proceeded to crush the stem, the leaves, and just created a massive amount of, it was 99% chaff, 1% seed. to the point where it became mulch in my yard, and it also produced some more frost wheat, but it was not collectible because the person made it harder to do the next step. So blue bonnets starts in late spring into early there. That will be probably the next one you're going to get. Damanitas, which is more from where I live, west into the hill country, Edwards Plateau, out to West Texas. It will bloom multiple times and produce small seeds. Firewheel, Indian blanket gets that there. Once again, you're collecting those seeds. Basket flower, which when you're dealing with it, we normally process basket flower at multiple sessions because inside that basket, inside the fluff that's there, the seeds are working their way from the bottom out. So the first pass through, you're getting all of the stuff right at the top. You leave it for the next cleaning session. There's more seeds coming out, and ultimately you go to it. But you don't want to shred the head because now you're dealing with material that you don't want to. Frog fruit, which is a great ground cover, bloom spring, summer, fall, but it's a staggered grower. So you may have ready collect seeds in late spring, then there'll be more and more. I've talked to the folks at Native American Seed, both Bill and Weston Neiman, about this, and they're trying to see if they can find a way to commercially collect it in a way that's cost effective. I hand collect it from my yard. It's a very big, prolific producer of seeds, but you can literally have four seed heads next to each other. One is, early flowering, another one is mid flowering, the other one is just finishing flowering, and the fourth one is ready to collect. So it's not an easy one to do. Rock rose blooms spring, summer, fall, and collect throughout the season. Cypress, standing cypress, I talked about. Esperanza, which is more southern than you guys, from where I live south. With climate change, it's a little more. Cactus has the ripe tunas. If you've seen prickly pear, you'll see the green pot. It'll go from flower to green pot to green tuna to when it gets red and ready to go. So Eve's necklace, where it gets its name from the multi-point seeds within the pod. Dentura, you may also know it as Angel's Trumpet, the Moonflower, or the name that I knew it originally as is gypsumweed, wonderful moth, night blooming plant supporting moss, which then supports bats and nightvine. Alamo vine was the first plant that I collected. It was growing in my yard, I believe, as a volunteer, but it could have been planted by the person there, though she did plant 18 crepe myrtles in a half acre. So I wasn't sure how much she loved Texas natives. Turk's cap uh, is a wonderful plant and produces its apple. Red yucca produces it and the high stalk. And then I talked a little bit about milkweed. So getting us to, you have the beautiful summer, the spring blue of blue bonnets. It produces a pod. It's in the same family as soybeans. So you start with that pod. So what I would do on a nice head like that, I may take two or three pods and tie in to, especially if I've got a nice cluster around, I find with sort of sitting in the middle, and put a little organza bag about that. I have organza bags of various sizes to catch what I can. And what you'll see in the far right, you'll see the pods as they're getting closer to being ready to go, but you'll also see a hole in the side of the pod that's supporting an insect that will munch on it. So You know it's a native because something in nature is trying to eat it. So I talked about Damanita, which is a very dry condition plant. Um, doesn't require great soil. It will, I grow it at the side of my driveway as an edging instead of having grass there. And you'll see on the left is the flowers just starting to finish from that. It's a really nice flower. And then in the right, you can see it creating those little tuft heads, which is a very common feature of a lot of the seeds. So every one of those prongs that you're seeing there is an individual seed. So I'll collect those periodically. Firewheel, there you can see the flower in bloom. Um, in Spanish, it's red sunflower is its name. You can see it from flower to where the petals are collapsing. And then, and I'm sorry I didn't get that one as good a focus as I would have liked, the head there. And this is an annual. So when you're collecting it, you may grab some heads, but I would, if you want to have firewheel there in the future, as you're collecting heads, scatter seeds. So you're grabbing a couple of heads, but also spreading a little seeds while you're doing it. Basket flower, and I truly love this one because you can see in that picture you have two different pollinators happily living there. There is no plant in my yard that's blackland that I will find as diverse a number of pollinators touching it as an American basket flower. And it gets its name, as you can see, from the basket that it sits in. Though, and at the very top of that is a little tuft, and which is all the stuff that's remnant from that flower. But what I want to also point out to you is you see on the left, you see that stem is green. The plant is sending energy up to grow those seeds to produce the fruit that it's trying to make. And then on the right, you can see that it is drying up, and that all the way down to almost the bottom of the frame is that. So when the plant gets to that condition, the plant is ready to harvest. If it looks like it's green anywhere up that shaft, it's still trying to produce seed. It may have some ripe seeds there, but it's still sending energy. Much like when trees, branches that are in the center of the canopy that don't get sunlight starve and dry and snap off. This is the same technique on almost any plant. Look to see if the stalk beneath the flower is dried and desiccated. If it is ready to harvest. And I talked about frog fruit. So on the left, you're seeing the 3/4 the way up. It's still putting out those beautiful ring of flowers going up. And the one on the right, it's still green, but the last of the buds is there. And then it will turn into the seed head. It will go through that next maturation and do that. And they are very tiny seeds. So I talked about rocklows, and I tend not to use the scientific name, though I always post it, is because I tend to butcher Latin. So I will spare you my butchered Latin. So you'll have the rock rose is a very ephemeral flower. You only have it for a little bit. So the flower will close up. As you can see behind the flower is the green where it's closed up. And to the right, you see the pod beginning, it's opening up and about to expel those 5 seeds. So you can see there are 4 really nice fat seeds and one that, now that may be the runt of the litter and still produce a viable plant. Don't know, but that's what you're looking for. So in my yard, I collect rock rose 2, 3 times a week as they are becoming there. So I may grab a handful of those pods. Once again, seeing that the reddish color is not the green that you see a little farther on the left side. And we talked about standing cypress and being the flower, the petals and all that are at the base. And then the stalk comes up, you get that beautiful red color. It is also one of the hummingbird plants. So you'll get that, and then you can see the seeds, and you're really talking about 3 millimeters length. And if you don't think in millimeters, they're tiny. You'll be able to see them, but you'll see. And what I did with a group that was cleaning seeds on Sunday in shirts, um, I had them take the pods off of the stem so that the seeds can fall out because, and I think you can see that at the very top, it'll open up and there are actually 4 chambers that the seeds are maturing in, and they'll open up at the top so that when the stalk blows in the wind, those little 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter seeds will go flying out. Esperanza yellow bell, I happen to like. It's one of my side of the driveway things in the bush, and you can see the yellow flower that turns into those green pods, and those green pods are another one that does open and the seeds will literally fly out from them. So it's a little bit easier to time because it's a little slower opening up and dispersing its seeds. I talked about the prickly pear and the tuna. So you can see the flower and the starting of the tuna. On the right, you can see that pod is green, or the tuna is green. And as it matures, it goes to red. This is one that you can use tongs that you would use to, you know, deal with anything that you want to grab, like French fries or something. And you can put the tong on it and give it a little twist. And if it will twist, that means it's ready to fall off. And then you can put it aside. If you do nothing, the moisture will evaporate out, it will work its way out, and it will actually have a rattle effect. But it'll still have pointy things on the side to get you. So whenever I'm dealing with tunas, I normally am then pulling pines out, even if when I'm careful. But if you've ever had prickly pear, you know, whether it's in a drink or something, if you cut it down its length, you can scrape out there. The seeds are very prominent, very easy to see, and you can squeeze out the meaty flesh and then just sort of use a ricer or something to get the seeds there. Eve's necklace is another one that produces those long, distinctive, hard to miss black pods that hold individual seeds. What I found and what I had volunteer demonstrated for me is I use just a cheap pair of pliers, and once it's ready, just sort of crack the shell and do it. The seed will fall out rather than plating it. Squeeze with a little pliers will give you a little space and the seed will come out. I talked about Datura, Angel's Trumpet, and those beautiful flowers that moths will come and do. And then you'll get these green, it'll go to green like that as it's going. And if you look a little bit in the bottom left corner of the right slide, you can see it going dark, getting brown. And if you look to the bottom as that brown thing, it will open up and there'll be an enormous amount of seeds that'll come out. So that is a very prickly pod. I use chopsticks and hand out chopsticks. And the other thing I do, because there is a toxicity to it, the difference between the hallucinogenic effect of gypsum weed, and the toxic kill you level is very varied. It's like, think of jalapeno, a mild one, a hot one. You can't tell. So what I do with the people who are working onto it, I make them wear gloves and then even after that, wash their hands just to make sure. I'm not worried that they're there, but it's the extra sense of protection of the people doing it. But the chopstick technique, you use one chopstick to hold it down, and you use the other one to sort of scrape out the seeds. Alamo vine was the first Texas native that I collected the seeds for. It is this beautiful white, and it's a daytime. It's in the morning glory family, but it is a day bloomer. It is beautiful and does that. Um, it covers and it is a big spreader. If you have a chain link fence and you don't know what else to do with it, you plant some Alamo vine onto it and it will cover your whole fence very happily. Its alternate name is wood rose, and I think you can see that the outer part that held the flower before it bloomed creates those five segments there. And then the pod, the seeds sit within it. And it is a prolific seed because it's a prolific bloomer. It's a prolific seed producer. Turk's cap is got its name from the obvious spiral turban sort of effect. And it is one of the great hummingbird, butterfly, long proboscis, long tongues get in there and can do it. It then produces the apple that's there. And if it is edible and you can eat it, I wouldn't, it has sort of an appley flavor, but I would never replace apples with a Turk's cap. They're not too big. So you're talking about a little bit bigger than a pea size, but it is edible on the scale of things. Red yucca, which is red but is definitely not a yucca, as you can tell from the scientific name. It comes from the aloe group, and it will create those seed heads that'll do it. And because of those long bands that wave in the wind, sometimes you'll come to that head and you'll look at it and you're going to pick it and you realize it's already empty because all the seeds in that pod were shaken out all around it. But if you get it just as it's starting to open, you can get a large quantity of seeds. We're never low on red yucca seeds. And I talked about antelope horn is a clear example of the pod, and then it opens and the seeds are there. And this was just a wonderful photograph to get what's there flying off. So, but if you put an organza bag over one of those pods or more, um, I have a butterfly bush that's on the side of my yard, and I have concrete on one side and my neighbor's manicured lawn on the other. So I tend to organza bag all of my pods because there is no place that seed is going to get to and grow. So I collect them for dispersion there. But you can see that one of the interesting things, and it was shown this in a demonstration, is the fluff that you're seeing at the end that catches the wind. It, if you have a large pack of it and do this in the roasting tray, like I talked about some of the other, you get this whole big pile of fluff. I mean, just stuff a pillowcase with. If you then take a grill lighter and just tip the edge of it, it will flash burn and all the seeds will quickly drop to the bottom, but you want them fully fluffed out. You don't want them still tight to each other because then the fire will do that. And that is an evolutionary trick of sitting in the prairie. Those seeds will catch on to something tall, grass, and hasn't fallen to the ground, a prairie fire comes in, and as soon as that first spark gets near it, the seeds will immediately fall to the ground, and the prairie flames will roll right over it. Because when you're doing prairie burns, if you're doing it when you don't have woody material, you're not fresh, you're doing a pretty routine lightning strike type burn. The ground below, if you were to push the ash aside and put your hand on the ground immediately after the fire went by, the ground underneath that ash is cool. So those seeds would have been on the ground there. So different techniques for cleaning different seeds types. Threshing, if you've ever seen people doing the threshing of wheat, is, sort of taking it and sort of banging the heads onto a flat area or a stone, and the wheat seeds would fall out. Whittling is taking those seeds in a basket, tossing them in the air, and the weight of the seeds will fall to gravity, and the finer stuff will blow in the wind. Fan. At Lady Bird Johnson, they have a special unit where you have a little cup that you throw the seed and the chaff in, and then you slowly bring up the fan, and the fan will start raising the seeds, which are heavier. They'll get them up in the air, but all of that little chaff and small material, the lighter stuff, will blow over the top and go into a collection area. And then you turn it down, and the cup is full of clean seeds. Using screens, uh, I use the same type of screens when I did soil analysis and grading out different size of aggregates. Those seeds, uh, if you have any kind of mesh basket, you can sort of play around with seeds will stay in this one, and all the finer materials will go through. And sometimes you do it the other way, where the branching material, the seeds will go through a screen, and I talked about hand picking, whether you're opening up a red yucca pod or an esperanza pod, or you're doing the blue bonnets that hadn't quite popped open, but they're ripe and ready to go. Separate stems, pods, and chaff. Separate fluff from the seed if possible. If you don't want to do the flashover, which you want to do outside or in at least a covered area open to the air so you don't set off smoke alarms, place the fluff seeds in a bag with a rock and give it a shake. The rock will bang against them and dislodge it. For near-term planning, cleaning perfectly is not necessary. As I talked, you don't have to have it perfect. And when I'm filling envelopes to get maximum distribution, I target, 12 to 20 seeds, and I use different size spoons. If you've ever heard of dash and pinch and drop, there are actually spoons which are various sequences of quarter to eighth to 16th, 32nd there, and do it. If you have an abundance, cowpen daisy is one that if you have some seeds, you have lots of seeds. So we talk about the asters. Here's another one, skeleton leaf goldeneye. You can see it from flower to the petals falling off to the heads becoming dark and mature. We talked about capsules like rock rose, and when I drop those capsules in, sometimes it may be in this case where the fifth seed has already fallen out, but those four are there. I let the heads in the bag, and occasionally I'll just give it a shake, and I can hear the seeds coming out. And sometimes when you're collecting seed heads, just be patient. The seeds will process and come loose because that's what they do in nature, and then pour out the seeds. Keeping a cool, dry, dark place, store in the coolest part of your home. Longer term, put in a Ziploc or a vacuum bag. in the fridge. You just don't want to freeze them unless you've really done that at the Wildflower Center Seed Bank. They may spend 3 to 4 months dehydrating those seeds from 40% humidity area to 30 to 20 to 10 to where it's just parched. Do not store outside in garages or sheds because we know what Texas and summer's like. Keep it in breathable bags, uh, paper bags, and anybody who's seen me in my collection knows what my fast food habits are because they can see all the bags that I repurpose for that. Coin envelopes that is used in seed libraries. And if you get the cellophane window billing envelope that you send back, those make great if you're putting a bunch of seeds in, put it in that because you can see what the seeds look like. So you can verify that the label on the envelope is correct. And I talked about keeping it completely dry, remaining moist. And then we go to the database, as you can see, and it talks about the blooming season. And knowing if it blooms in spring, the seeds are going to be ready late spring, summer. Some great books for propagating. Jill Noakes' How to Grow Native Plants of Texas and the Southwest is a really definitive guide. It isn't as complete across the line. It's lacking some, but the analogy I give that the Velvet Underground didn't sell a lot of albums, but pretty much everybody who got a Velvet Underground album started a garage band. In this case, every propagator of seeds I know has a copy of Jill's book. Growing and propagating wildflowers is another great one. Secrets of Plant Propagation and Propagating Plants is one of the newer ones. All of them, none of them are definitive, but they all add to the base of knowledge that's there. I'll leave it up for just a second more because I want to give anybody who wants to get a screenshot of it that. And we all know about Lady Bird Johnson's Center. Now, because they are national, they'll tell you that it lives in Texas, but it won't tell you which ecoregion where the society's database is there. And one of the great resources of Native American seed is that they actually have images of what seedlings look like. So if you've planted some of the seeds, it will tell you what those first couple of leaves come out look like. That, and I will stop sharing here in a second. I just have to remember how to do that. Oh, there it is. I'm just trying to find. So I'm stopped sharing, and I'm sure there are questions. And let me see if I can. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to look down.
I don't see questions in the chat. Are there folks who have questions in the room?
Oh,
I'm open. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Okay, is Jill Noakes's book still the definitive book for this?
I think it's the model that all the other books are based on. I think that's some because I have all of them in my library. Growing and Propagating Wildflowers by Phillips. I think if your budget is strained, I would get Phillips's book, but I have them because I'm a believer in he who has the most books wins. So
Well, I have Jill's book. So.
But I think Growing and Propagating Wildflowers by Phillips is probably the next book you want. If you've gotten everything out of Jill's book, go with the other way. Go with that one.
Thank you.
I've got a question. If you're trimming off the seed heads from a perennial, do they have to be ripe when you trim them off, or can they ripen without being attached to the plant?
No, you want that stem, like the wood rose and that, there is a very clear line between the plant, because if the plant is no longer sending moisture up the stalk and chlorophyll down to the roots, it has done the mission of creating the seed. So if you see, it doesn't take very much dark below the seed head, the flower head, but you want it to make sure that it says the plant is done. I pointed that out very much in the American basket flower. Alamo vine's the same way. It is pretty easy to tell. Bluebonnets are a little iffier because they'll go not ready, explode, you've lost the seeds. So that's why I use organza bags. So you can be a little more, don't have to be as attentive to the collection point. But yes, you want the stem as dry and desiccated as you think it can be. Now in Turk's cap, it gets very red, apple red. It's ready to go.
There's a question in the chat about Indian paintbrush. And have you been able to successfully grow that from seed, or do you know whether it's possible?
Yes, it is possible. It does do that. But once again, you want to make sure that it is absolutely ready to expel seed. Because if you've collected it and you're getting no results, you probably harvested it too soon. You were a little impatient, and that's okay. We all learn and do, but it can do that. Now, the seeds literally are coming off the head and doing it much like how Pendaisy has this massive seed distribution. So when you're harvesting it, toss some around the plant and be a little patient and let them go. Because a lot of things, especially firewheel gaillardia, it will actually be ripe in the summer. It's there, it is clear. But it's not releasing those seeds because it's August in Texas. It knows better. So it's waiting for that big, heavy, massive raindrop. The big, heavy one hits that head. And once it hits that head, it's going to shatter and scatter those seeds. And because the rain has come, the ground is soft, and that rain's going to pound those freshly spread seeds into the ground. That's how you know that it's there. So you want to be careful about mulching around them, because if the seed doesn't have a spot to get through to the ground, because it has to physically touch soil that's there. So you can push it away, out of the way if you're casting, but you definitely want seed to ground direct contact. Step on it. I recommend scattering seeds just ahead of rain, because Mother Nature will plant those seeds into the soil as it needs to.
So I think the question was actually about the hemiparasitic plant Castanea, Indian paintbrush, and not firewheel.
Oh, Indian paintbrush. I'm sorry. But it is about that time in the soil. So if you're familiar with, and I'm not sure in Dallas how much it differs from New Braunfels down here, but the seeds will release off of the plant at a certain time. And that is the indicator for when you want to plant those seeds. And you want, once again, firm contact with soil and let it soak in and drive into the ground, because it may have not had enough time in the soil to give it the indication that it has gone through the winter, the fall into winter, so that when the spring rains, if we're lucky, hit us, that it will sprout and do that.
I have another question. I have both our native species Turk's cap and the hybrid giant Big Mama Turk's cap that Greg Grant found. I've noticed a lot of the fruits on the native species Turk's cap, but I've not noticed fruit on the Big Mama. Do you know if it produces fruit or not?
Well, that's the nature of hybrids. Is in vegetables, hybrids will do one of two things. They will either be sterile, which may be why you're not getting an apple, or they'll revert to one of their parents. So you may revert back to the native Turk's cap. But if you're not getting apples on the big Turk's cap, but you're getting it on your native, that says you have pollinators, you have everything you need, but the hybrid is sterile. If you like the appearance and the hummingbirds and the other critters come to it, I'm not going to fight you on it, but you're definitely not. But if you're seeing hummingbirds on the native and you're not seeing it on the big one, it's probably not filling its niche in nature like it's supposed to.
Actually, I see hummingbirds more on the Big Mama than I do on the species, simply because of where they're located.
There you go. Then it's doing its ecological niche, even though it's not going to produce more. Now, are you getting anything out of the rhizome?
Oh yeah,
Little
spread
shoots.
prolifically that way.
Okay, then so it may not be a good seed spreader, but it's going to do it through rhizome. Okay. And I know a lady had her hand up.
So this might be a little outside your purview, but I've heard that if you want to deadhead flowers to encourage blooming, you have to cut off the old bloom before it turns brown. Otherwise, the plant already thinks it's made seed and the deadheading isn't effective. Can you speak to that at all, or is that kind of not really your niche?
My wife, who was a master gardener, who kids me about tending weeds, and it's kind of hard to argue with a master gardener when it's frostweed, milkweed, butterfly weed there. But so I deadhead her roses for her because I love my husband making my wife happy. So I do that with roses, and that's promoting it. You can. So there are plants like rock rose that continuously bloom. It's not worried about deadheading. It is going to keep making seed all along. On Turk's cap, I don't know because I've never done that. And I do not, I've had Turk's cap in my yard for 4 years, and I'm now just starting to collect some seeds out of it there. But I don't think deadheading for natives, I don't know of any native that will bloom better deadheading it. I might be wrong because that is sort of contrary to what I would do, but I can understand trying that as an experiment. But it would have to be something that blooms continuously through the year. So if it blooms in spring and that's when it blooms, deadheading will probably not get you a success. If it's something that will bloom continuously, I don't think deadheading is necessary. So that's there. I hope that answered your question, because the way I would think about it is if you have two of them side by side, try deadheading one and not deadheading the other and see what happens. So a little citizen science might be in order there for your question. And once again, I am, sometimes I'm just the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. So I am continuously learning. There are no fancy letters behind my name. So I appreciate it. I've worked really hard to learn and continuous. So I am not above saying I don't know. Again, thank you very much for your time, and I hope I added some small nuggets to your knowledge about native plants and seeds.